3 disturbing true Craigslist horror stories. Like and subscribe so you don't miss our next chilling horror story with new stories every week. I'm not proud of being cheap. When I can save a few $100s on something that's basically the same as a new one, I'll do it. That's how I ended up scrolling Craigslist at midnight, looking for a camera. I've been getting into photography as a hobby, and my old DSLR had finally started giving me issues. The shutter stuck sometimes, the autofocus would hunt, that kind of thing. I found a listing for a used Canon 5D Mark II at a price that made my fingers itch. The pictures in the ad were decent. The seller said it came with a lens, and he added, "Moving, must sell." The number was local. That always helps. We arranged to meet at 5:30 the next evening at a house on the edge of town. He told me it was fine to test the camera there. "It's in my garage," he said. I remember thinking that was unusual. Most people preferred a public place. But I wanted the camera, so I agreed. The neighborhood looked like somewhere between sleepy and forgotten. Narrow streets, a couple of dead maple trees, metal trash cans scattered in driveways. I pulled up and recognized the house from the photos. 1 story, vinyl siding, blue trim. A rusted pickup sat in the driveway, and the garage door was up. Dim yellow lights spilling out. A man in his 40s came to the door. He introduced himself as Ethan. He shook my hand and led me out into the garage, where a folding table held an array of camera gear. Everything was laid out obsessively neat. Batteries in a row, filters in labeled cases, a small felt cloth folded to a corner. The camera looked fine. The body had a few scuffs. The lens was clean. Ethan smiled a lot. The kind of smile that said he knew the value of politeness. "Try it out," he said. "Take a few shots. There's a good light down the street if you want different conditions." I sat in the pickup's shadow and started firing off a few test frames. The shutter sounded solid. The autofocus was crisp. I felt that small, stupid thrill of getting a deal. Ethan hovered nearby, offering tips about white balance and apertures like an overly keen friend. After about 10 minutes, I asked to see the memory card. "Just pop it in," he said. "You can look through the photos if you like." He handed me a little SD card holder. I popped the card into my phone adapter and tapped through the thumbnails. The first dozen were typical test shots: a mailbox, a cracked sidewalk, a stop sign. Then there were pictures that made my stomach drop. A photo of my house. It was taken from a low angle, almost like someone had been crouching in the bushes. The porch light was on. My car was visible in the driveway. My front door, the exact pattern on the wreath, was clear as day. The timestamp on the file said the photo had been taken 3 nights earlier. I told myself it was some weird coincidence. Maybe Ethan had driven by and photographed a row of houses. I scrolled on. There were more. My street at dawn, my neighbor's dog sleeping on its porch, a close-up of my mailbox with a rust pattern in the corner. Then a shot that made my hands go numb, an image taken through a window, my living room couch, blanket folded just like it is on Friday nights, a pair of shoes kicked off by the door. Ethan watched my face while I scrolled, his smile getting smaller. "That's, unrelated," he said too quickly. "I mean, I do a lot of test shots around town. Shows character." I felt ridiculous. My head told me to leave now. but the camera was right there. I'd already pictured a couple of shots posted on my small Instagram feed. I told myself I'd ask questions later. I closed the photos and handed the card back. "I need to think," I said, hoping my voice sounded calm. Ethan leaned in. "Look, man, you wouldn't be the first to be creeped out by a few photos. But honestly, who keeps a perfect record of every house they see? I like the texture of different places. It's my thing." He was watching me too closely. I decided then I didn't want to be there alone anymore. "I'm going to step around front," I said. "I'll be right back." As I walked to the front of the property, the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood came back. The low hum of an AC unit, a distant dog. My heart was still thudding, but I told myself I was overreacting. When I turned the corner, someone's porch light flicked on across the street. A shadow moved in that house's doorway. I glanced at Ethan, who was standing in the garage watching me, hands folded. He didn't move to come with me. I put the camera back on the table and said I wasn't comfortable. I wanted my cash back. Ethan didn't blink. "That's okay," he said. "Maybe tomorrow." I asked for my phone. He handed it over and seemed to linger a beat too long, touching the screen. There was a small catch in his smile, like he'd enjoyed watching me scroll through images of my own life. I left the property and got in my car. I called my girlfriend on the way home and told her, trying to keep my voice level. She told me to call the police and report it. I went back to the house with my phone in hand, but the street was empty. The garage light was off. The pickup still in the driveway. No sign of Ethan. The next morning at work, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called non-emergency police and filed a report. They sent out a patrol the next day. But by then the house was quiet. The pickup gone. "These things happen," the officer said. But his tone made me feel like I'd wasted his time. 2 nights later, at 2:01 a.m., I got a text. No number. Just a photo. It was taken from across the street, low angle, showing my house lit by the porch light. The timestamp on my phone said it was sent at 1:58 a.m. that morning. Under the photo, a message read, "Nice camera. Make sure you take good care of it." When you think about being watched, you imagine a face at the window, someone peeking. I didn't see a face. I saw the evidence that someone had walked through the dark and stood where bushes and cars blur into shapes, lifting a camera and clicking shots of the life I thought was private. I sold that camera a year later. I still look over my shoulder when I walk to my car, and I don't like strangers who ask to meet at a garage. Craigslist is great if you want a bargain. Just maybe don't agree to test a camera in someone's garage. I've been using Craigslist for years, mostly to sell old electronics, the occasional couch, and once to buy a used camera. But this story is about the time I tried to buy a car on Craigslist and almost didn't make it home alive. It started with an ad for a used 2012 Honda Civic. The photos made it look like a steal. Clean exterior, low mileage, listed for $3,200. That's about $1,000 below market value. The description said the seller was moving overseas and needed to sell quickly. There was no phone number, only a Craigslist reply email. I sent a quick message asking if it was still available, and within an hour, I got a reply. The seller's name was Tyler, and he wrote that the car was in excellent shape, but he needed to sell it as soon as possible. He said we could meet at his storage unit where he kept it. That gave me pause. Most people keep their cars at home, not a storage facility, but he said he was between places because he'd already moved out of his apartment. We set a time for Saturday afternoon. He gave me an address on the outskirts of town in a semi-industrial area I didn't really know well. I asked if we could meet at a public place instead, like a parking lot. But he said the car didn't have current plates, so he preferred to show it where it was stored. That was another red flag, but I told myself people have all sorts of situations. And besides, I'd be in broad daylight. When I got to the area, the street was eerily quiet. There were rows of large, windowless warehouse buildings, all painted the same dull beige. The storage facility was at the very end of the block. The front gate was wide open, but there was no guard, no office in sight. Just long rows of storage units. Tyler was waiting near a unit about halfway down the row. He looked to be in his late 20s, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He waved when he saw me and walked over. Something about his demeanor felt wrong. His smile was forced, and he kept glancing down the row behind me, as if expecting someone. He led me to a unit with the door halfway open. Inside, I could see the silver Civic, just like the pictures. But the unit was dim, lit only by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. I stepped inside to get a better look, and that's when I noticed. There were no license plates on the car at all, not even expired ones. "Go ahead, check it out," Tyler said, stepping aside. I opened the driver's side door and sat inside. The interior was clean, maybe too clean, like it had been freshly detailed to the point where even the floor mats were spotless. As I was checking the dashboard, I heard the metallic clank of the storage unit door. I turned, and my stomach dropped. Tyler was pulling it down. "Hey, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp. He paused halfway, then gave me a nervous laugh. "Oh, just keeping the cold out. Don't worry." But there was no cold. It was nearly 80 degrees outside. My instinct screamed at me to leave. I stepped out of the car and made my way toward the opening. That's when I heard footsteps echoing from outside the unit. 2 more men appeared, both wearing hoodies pulled tight over their heads. Tyler quickly looked over his shoulder at them, then back at me. "So, you got the cash on you?" I didn't answer. I just pushed the door up hard and slipped out before they could block the entrance. The 2 men froze for a split second, then started after me. I sprinted toward my car, my keys already in my hand. I could hear them shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I jumped into my car, slammed the locks, and floored it out of the lot. As I sped away, I saw them standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. Later that night, I checked the Craigslist ad again. It was gone. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in that storage unit a few seconds longer. I've been into photography for over a decade, and I've collected all kinds of old cameras. Some are purely decorative, but others I actually use for film shots. Back in 2019, I was browsing Craigslist for vintage gear when I came across an ad that caught my eye. It was a 1970s Hasselblad medium format camera, the kind that normally sells for thousands, listed for just $250. The post was short, with a few grainy photos. The description simply read, "Selling my father's old camera. Works fine. Pickup only. Cash." The seller's name was Mark. At first I figured it might be broken, but I reached out anyway. Mark replied almost instantly, telling me I could come by that evening. He gave me an address in an older part of town, in a neighborhood I didn't usually go to. He insisted on no shipping, no meeting halfway, only in person. I arrived just before sunset. The house looked abandoned. Paint was peeling, the grass was overgrown, and there were no lights on inside. I double-checked the address. This was it. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately, like he'd been standing right there. The man in the doorway was in his late 40s, thin, with deep lines in his face and eyes that didn't seem to focus on me. Without greeting me, he stepped back and gestured for me to come in. The air inside was stale, with a faint chemical smell, like old film developing fluid. The walls were bare, except for one thing. Dozens of black and white photos, tacked up haphazardly. They were all of people, random people. Some looked candid, others posed. The weirdest part was that every single person in those photos had their eyes scratched out with something sharp. I tried not to stare, focusing on the table where the camera sat. It was in great condition, just as described. I picked it up, looked through the viewfinder, and noticed there was still a roll of film inside. Mark was watching me closely now. "That film's my father's last roll," he said, his voice low and almost shaky. "Don't develop it." I asked why, but he just repeated it. "Don't develop it. Just don't." The atmosphere was getting more uncomfortable by the second, so I counted out the cash, thanked him, and left. Back home, I couldn't stop thinking about the camera. Of course, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to develop the film myself in my darkroom. The first few frames were normal: landscapes, a dog, a park bench. Then, the next ones made my stomach drop. They were of houses, my neighborhood, then my street, and then my house. The final shot was taken through my bedroom window, and in the photo, lying asleep in my bed, was me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I drove back to that house to confront Mark. But the place was empty, completely gutted, like no one had lived there in years. I still have the camera. I've thought about throwing it away, but I can't bring myself to. It just sits on my shelf now, pointing at the wall. But sometimes, when I'm not looking, I feel like it's pointing somewhere else. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe so you don't miss our next chilling horror story with new stories every week.